I remember that morning like it was a cruel trick of fate, one of those mornings that starts off so ordinary you barely notice the weight of the world pressing against your chest, and then everything changes in a heartbeat. The sunlight had just begun to filter through the half-open blinds in our bedroom, painting stripes of gold and white across the floor. I stirred awake, expecting the familiar warmth of his presence beside me, but the side of the bed that should have been warm and lived in was cold and empty. "Michael?" I called, my voice soft, sleepy, and hopeful. I thought maybe he had gone to the kitchen early, maybe to make coffee, something he always did when he wanted to treat me to that little bit of comfort before the day truly began. But the house was silent. Too silent. I got up, my bare feet whispering against the wooden floor. There was a strange heaviness in the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it. The subtle thud. Or maybe it was the lack of one. My heart started beating faster, an uneasy rhythm that I knew meant something was wrong even before my mind fully processed it. In the hallway, I found him. Michael. My Michael. My partner for 15 years. My confidant. The man I had loved through thick and thin was lying on the floor. His eyes were closed, his face pale in the harsh morning light. For a moment I thought he was asleep. A cruel, awful joke, I hoped, and I shook him gently. "Michael, wake up!" My voice was rising now, breaking into a panicked shriek. When he didn't move, I pressed my hand against his chest, felt the absence of a heartbeat, the coldness that no living body should have. Panic clawed at my throat. My legs gave way, and I sank beside him, clutching him as if sheer will could bring him back. I screamed, a sound so raw it seemed to echo off the walls of the house, and in that scream, I think the world itself seemed to pause. The ambulance came quickly, though in moments like these, time feels slow, cruelly slow. Paramedics worked over him with practiced efficiency, their faces set and serious. They looked at me occasionally, their eyes apologetic as if they already knew, and in that moment, I understood. They couldn't save him. I don't remember exactly how I got dressed for the hospital or how I followed them in a daze. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. Friends and family called, but I couldn't answer. I barely registered the words they said. People kept telling me to stay strong, to be brave. But I didn't want to be brave. I wanted him back. I wanted the impossible. At the hospital, the doctor came to me with that dreaded, clinical expression. "I'm so sorry," he said, and the words themselves seemed insufficient, trivial, meaningless. I didn't hear the rest. I heard only the part that mattered. He was gone. When they finally allowed me to see him, lying there, peaceful yet disturbingly still, I felt my heart shatter in ways I didn't know were possible. I ran my fingers over his hand, warm from life moments ago but now a fragile shell, and I wept. I wept for him, for us, for the life we had planned and the life that would never be. The hours blurred into a haze of phone calls, messages, and visits from close friends who seemed to drift in and out of my consciousness. People kept saying, "Call if you need anything." But how could anyone call me back to life when a piece of me had died with him? I kept thinking about the last time I saw him, the last words we spoke. Did I say enough? Did I show enough love? Did he know how much he meant to me? Even as grief consumed me, a faint, gnawing sense of unease began to creep in. Something was off. Not in the sense of his death. He had been healthy, yes, but life is fragile, and sometimes cruelly so. No, it was something else. something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then I remembered his phone, lying on the bedside table, buzzing softly, vibrating against the hard wood. It was unusual for him to leave it behind. He was meticulous about his phone, always within reach. I told myself I didn't need it, that I couldn't bear to hear it, couldn't bear to see the digital traces of a life abruptly stopped. And yet my eyes kept drifting toward it. There was a faint glow from the screen, a blinking light signaling a missed call or a message. I tried to look away, tried to immerse myself in grief, but curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, wouldn't allow it. The funeral was still days away, and the house felt hollow without him. Each room was saturated with his absence. I walked past the kitchen and remembered the small things: the coffee cup he always left in the sink, the folded newspaper on the counter, the keys neatly arranged on the hook. Little reminders of a life that had been ordinary, peaceful, and complete, until it wasn't. Even as I grieved, I started noticing things I hadn't before. Small inconsistencies in our life together, odd receipts, messages half hidden on his desk. I pushed them aside, telling myself it was the grief playing tricks on me. But part of me, a quieter, more cautious part, felt that there was more to discover, that maybe the life I had known was only part of the story. I think that's when the first seeds of fear planted themselves in my heart. Fear not just of the future without him, but of the truths I might uncover if I looked too closely. Michael had been my anchor, my safe harbor. And now, without him, the world seemed suddenly vast, wild, and unpredictable. That night, I barely slept. I sat by the window, wrapped in his old cardigan, the one he used to wear when he was cold, even in summer. The house was quiet, but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floors were enough to keep me on edge. I kept thinking about the phone, lying dormant on the nightstand, its screen dark but hinting at secrets. I knew I would have to answer it eventually. I didn't know why or what I was hoping to hear. Perhaps a final message from him, a way to say goodbye one last time. Or perhaps something else, something I wasn't ready for. Morning came again, the sun spilling its light across the floor like it did every day. But this morning, I felt hollowed out, a shell of the person I had been. The reality of the funeral loomed over me like a shadow, but even more than that, the thought of that phone's inevitable ring gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on calling the funeral home, the caterers, the florist. But every task felt impossible. By the time the day of the funeral arrived, I had rehearsed my grief 1,000 times in my mind, practiced the hollow smile for friends and family, and prepared for the words I would say at his service. And yet, deep down, I knew that nothing could prepare me for the moment when his phone rang, for the choice I would have to make in the midst of unbearable sorrow. I didn't know it then, but the phone call would change everything. It would reveal truths I had never imagined, truths that would shake the foundation of my memories, my marriage, and the man I had thought I knew. And so, with trembling hands and a heart too heavy to bear, I stepped into the day that would forever redefine my life. The morning of the funeral arrived with a quiet, almost deceptive serenity. The sky was a pale gray, the kind of gray that doesn't promise rain, but carries the weight of all the sadness the world seems to hold. I stared at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the reflection of a woman I once knew. My eyes were puffy and red from sleepless nights, my hair tangled and limp, my face pale and drained. I had dressed in the black dress I had kept in the back of my closet for occasions I never thought I would face alone. The house felt eerily silent without Michael moving through it. I had imagined so many mornings waking up next to him, hearing his sleepy groans, watching him make that same old cup of coffee, the steam curling up like it was carrying his presence into the room. But today, all of that was gone. Every small habit, every little quirk, every laugh or sigh, it was gone. I went through the motions of getting ready, though my hands shook as I pinned my hair back and tried to calm my breathing. Friends and family would begin arriving soon, and I wanted to appear strong. Not for me, for them, for the neighbors, for anyone who might watch me and think that a widow could carry herself with dignity. But how does one appear strong when a part of their soul has been torn away? As I descended the staircase, I noticed the subtle signs of Michael's life scattered across the house. The folded newspaper on the kitchen counter, his slippers neatly placed by the couch, the coffee mug still warm from last night. Everything seemed frozen in time, as if the world itself was reluctant to move forward without him. I felt a pang of guilt. How could life go on when mine had stopped? The first to arrive was my sister, Diane, her face pale but composed. She hugged me tightly, and I clung to her as if the act could anchor me to something familiar. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to find the words. Everything felt like a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. Soon after, the calls began. Friends, neighbors, distant relatives. Everyone offered condolences, spoke in hushed tones, shared memories of Michael that made me laugh through my tears, and sometimes silently wonder if they knew more than I did. There were glances exchanged between certain people, fleeting looks of something I couldn't quite place, judgment, curiosity, or perhaps relief that they weren't the ones grieving. I tried to dismiss it, to focus on the task at hand, preparing for the funeral, honoring the man I had loved, and keeping myself from falling apart in front of everyone. The florist arrived next, a small, delicate woman who had worked with Michael's mother for years. She brought lilies, Michael's favorite, and arranged them around the house with a quiet, respectful reverence. Watching her work, I realized I was barely able to focus. Everything was moving in slow motion, each action deliberate, as if the world itself had slowed to match my grief. Then came the family I hadn't expected. Michael's cousin, Peter, showed up unannounced, holding a small leather-bound book in his hands. He didn't speak at first, just handed it to me, and in that moment, I felt a shiver of unease. "I thought you should have this," he said quietly. I took it, fingers trembling, and opened it to see sketches, notes, and what looked like private journals. My heart sank. Why had I never known about this part of his life? I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself that this wasn't the moment for revelations, not with the funeral looming. As the day progressed, neighbors and friends began arriving at the house. There were hugs, quiet whispers, and stories shared in small, fleeting bursts. Some memories were funny, some painful, but all carried that same bittersweet weight that made me realize just how many lives Michael had touched, and yet how small I felt standing among them, knowing I had lost the one person who mattered most. Then there was the matter of the casket. It sat in the living room, open, polished, and solemn. It was a strange, surreal thing to see. So familiar, and yet so final. Michael's features, serene yet frozen, seemed almost unreal. I ran my hand along the edge of the casket, trembling, trying to memorize every detail, trying to hold on to him in some way. I felt the presence of the life we had shared, and yet it seemed as though it was slipping through my fingers like sand. While helping the funeral director with small arrangements, I noticed the faint vibration of Michael's phone. It lay on the coffee table, almost hidden among papers and flowers, the screen glowing with an incoming call. I froze, my hand hovering over it. I told myself it wasn't important, that I couldn't bear the distraction. Not now. Yet I couldn't stop glancing at it, as if it were taunting me. The calls, the messages, the small acts of kindness and the whispered condolences, they all blended together into a haze. I found myself retreating to the study, the one room where Michael spent hours working on his projects, reading and writing. It smelled faintly of his cologne, mixed with the paper and leather of his books. I sank into his chair, letting the quiet of the room wrap around me, and tried to remember the man he was. The laughter, the late-night talks, the quiet moments we shared that no one else knew about. I thought of the life we had built together. The home, the routines, the small victories and disappointments that made it ours. And yet, for all the years we had spent side by side, I realized there were things I didn't know. Small things, little secrets perhaps, or just moments he had kept private. And in that realization, a small, nagging fear began to grow. What else had I missed? What else would I uncover once he was gone? The hours passed slowly. The first mourners began to arrive, their faces etched with sympathy and sorrow. I greeted them with a weak smile, a practiced nod, a soft "thank you" that felt empty in my mouth. Inside, I was unraveling, one strand of grief at a time. But still the phone remained, vibrating faintly, waiting. I tried to ignore it, told myself it wasn't mine to answer, that it could wait until later. But every time I looked at it, the tension tightened in my chest. My children came home that afternoon. Their faces were pale, mirroring my own fear and sadness. They clung to me, their small hands gripping mine, their eyes wide with confusion. They didn't understand death yet. Not fully, but they understood loss, and their presence reminded me of my responsibilities, the life I still had to protect even as mine seemed to crumble. As evening approached, the house grew quieter again. Most of the mourners had left, and the funeral director came to finalize the details for the next day. I sat alone in the study, the phone now silent but ominously present, a reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. I ran my fingers over the edge of the chair, thinking of Michael, wondering if he had left me clues, if there were messages I hadn't yet received. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every distant sound made my heart jump. And then I dreamt of him, not in the peaceful way one might hope, but alive, angry, and speaking in riddles I couldn't understand. I woke in a cold sweat, the faint glow of the phone calling to me from the nightstand. I wanted to look away, to pretend it wasn't there. But the pull was too strong. I realized then that I couldn't ignore it forever. Whatever message awaited me, whatever voice on the other end, would arrive whether I was ready or not. And deep down, I feared it. I feared what I might learn, what secrets might finally come to light. But more than that, I feared leaving it unanswered. Because in that small, glowing rectangle, I sensed a piece of him still alive, still reaching out, still trying to speak to me. And so, as the sun set behind the gray clouds, I prepared myself. I didn't know what I would hear. I didn't know if it would bring comfort or devastation, clarity or chaos. All I knew was that tomorrow at the funeral I would have to face it, and I would have to answer. The day of the funeral arrived in a blur of gray skies and cold wind that seemed to slice right through my coat. I woke early, before dawn, unable to sleep. My hands shook as I reached for the black dress I had laid out the night before. It felt heavy, more than just fabric, like a shroud for my grief, a symbol of the life I had lost and the emptiness I now carried inside me. The house was quiet, almost unbearably so. I moved through the familiar rooms, noting the little details that now seemed painfully poignant. Michael's toothbrush still sat upright in the cup, a smear of toothpaste faint on the bristles. His slippers remained neatly by the door. I thought of how ordinary life had been, how comforting the small routines were, and how suddenly they had been ripped away from me. By the time the funeral director arrived, I felt hollowed out, a ghost walking through my own home. The casket was brought down from the bedroom, polished and open, the wood gleaming under the dim light. Seeing him again, lying there so still, so quiet, was almost unbearable. I ran my hand along the edge, my fingers trembling. He looked peaceful, almost as though he were sleeping, but the absence of breath, the coldness of his skin, told a truth I could not ignore. He was gone. The first guests arrived, family, friends, colleagues. Their faces were a mix of sorrow and awkwardness, the kind of polite grief that somehow made me feel even more alone. I greeted each person with a nod, a weak smile, a whispered thank you that felt hollow in my mouth. They spoke kind words about him, shared memories, some funny, some touching. And yet, for all their stories, I felt an odd distance. They knew pieces of him, but they didn't know him the way I had. As people whispered among themselves, I noticed the subtle dynamics unfolding, the quiet exchanges, the brief glances of discomfort, the careful avoidance of certain topics. I realized that while I was grappling with my grief, the world around me carried on, observing, judging, commenting. My life had been upended, yet theirs went on, wrapped in their curiosity and social etiquette. The service began with the minister speaking softly, his voice steady and comforting, though it did little to soothe the gnawing ache inside me. He spoke of Michael's life, his generosity, his laughter, his love for family. I listened, nodding at the appropriate moments, trying to summon the composure I didn't feel. I wanted to speak, to cry out, to tell the world what he truly meant to me. But the words refused to come. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people gathered. There was Diane, my sister, her hand firmly gripping mine. Peter, Michael's cousin, holding the leather-bound book close to his chest. Friends from work, neighbors, distant relatives. Some faces brought comfort, some a strange sense of unease, and all the while I couldn't stop thinking about that phone. The thought was a small, insistent whisper in the back of my mind, but I tried to push it away. Not now, not in front of everyone. As the minister continued, I found myself drifting into memories. I remembered the first time I met Michael, the nervous way he had asked me out, the gentle patience he showed when I struggled to open up. I remembered our wedding day, the quiet moments late at night when we would talk about our dreams and fears. I remembered the nights we spent laughing until our sides hurt, the days we spent building our home, creating a life that felt safe, ordinary, perfect. And I remembered the last night we shared, Our quiet dinner, his warm smile, the way he had brushed my hair back and kissed my forehead. The memory was bittersweet, a mix of warmth and unbearable ache. I felt my chest tighten, tears threatening to spill over. I blinked rapidly, forcing them back, because I could not break down. Not here, not now. People were watching, and grief, I realized, is always public in a room full of strangers and acquaintances. During the eulogy, I tried to focus, listening to stories that painted Michael in ways I hadn't known. His kindness, his humor, his unwavering support for friends and family. I smiled through the sorrow, my heart aching for the truth I had lived with, and the new truths that seemed to hover just out of reach, like shadows waiting to be revealed. And then I felt it, a faint vibration, almost imperceptible but there. My eyes darted down to the casket, Michael's phone. It lay there, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. My breath caught in my throat. The vibration stopped, leaving only the terrifying stillness. I told myself it was nothing, that it must be someone calling him out of habit, someone who didn't know he was gone. But the fear, that creeping, nagging fear, began to grow. As the service continued, I couldn't focus on the words. I kept glancing at the phone, my mind racing. What if it rang again? What if the person on the other end demanded answers I couldn't give, or worse, held truths I wasn't ready to face? My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic rhythm that no minister's words could calm. After the formal service, there were prayers and a moment of silence. I stood there, trembling slightly, feeling the eyes of the mourners on me. I wanted to speak, to tell them about the man I had known, the life we had shared, the love that now felt hollowed out by absence. But no words came. Instead, I whispered a quiet goodbye to him, a private farewell that no one could hear, and felt a strange, suffocating weight lift slightly from my chest. The moment passed, and people began moving toward the casket, some to pay their final respects, others simply out of habit or obligation. I stood back, letting them approach, letting them grieve in their own ways. And then it happened, the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The phone rang. At first, I thought it was a trick of the mind, a cruel coincidence. But then it rang again, insistent, urgent, impossible to ignore. The sound pierced the quiet, reverberating through the room, and I felt every eye turn toward the casket. I froze, paralyzed, my hand hovering near the edge, trembling. People whispered. Some looked at me in confusion, some in pity. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The phone rang a third time, shrill and demanding, and my heart leapt into my throat. My mind raced. Should I answer it? Should I let it ring? Could I bear the truth if I picked it up? I knew in that moment that the answer would change everything. This was not just a phone call, it was a bridge between the life I had known and the truths I had yet to uncover. My hands shook as I reached out, fingers grazing the smooth surface of the phone, and then, as if sensing my hesitation, the room seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with expectation, with grief, with the unspoken promise of revelation. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and lifted the phone to my ear. The voice on the other end was faint at first, almost unrecognizable, but then it became clear. It was his voice, or at least it sounded like his. My heart stopped, my breath caught, and tears streamed down my face. I wanted to hang up, to deny the impossible, but the words coming through were too compelling, too intimate, too devastating to ignore. And as I listened, I realized that the life I had thought I knew, the man I had loved, had left me one final message, a message that would unravel everything I thought was true, that would shatter my understanding of him, and force me to confront secrets that had been hidden in plain sight for years. The moment I lifted the phone to my ear, a silence greeted me first, oppressive, heavy, as if the world itself had stopped to watch me. My hand shook, my heart hammering against my ribcage like it wanted to escape. The room seemed to fade, leaving only me, the casket, and that small, blinking device that had once been so mundane in his life. Now it felt like a conduit to something bigger, something terrifying. Then the voice came. At first, it was distorted, almost mechanical, like someone had recorded it and played it back on a broken speaker, but then it sharpened, clearer, unmistakably familiar. "Hello?" I froze. That voice, soft, steady, intimate, it was Michael's. My Michael, my husband, my love. My grief-stricken mind could not reconcile what I was hearing. "Michael?" I whispered, my own voice trembling, barely audible. My fingers gripped the edge of the casket, knuckles white, nails digging into the wood. The line was silent for a moment, and I thought I had imagined it. I had to be dreaming. It wasn't possible. He was gone. I had held him, touched him, seen him lying there in the casket, so impossibly still, and yet here he was, or at least his voice was. Then he spoke again, and this time the words hit me like a hammer. "Eleanor, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, desperate to catch every word, terrified that if I looked away, I might lose him again. My whole body trembled as I tried to steady my breathing. "I didn't want you to find out like this," the voice continued. "There are things I never told you. I wanted to protect you, to protect us, but the truth has a way of surfacing, doesn't it?" I shook my head, trying to make sense of the words. "Michael, what are you talking about?" My voice broke in the middle, raw and desperate. I could feel the eyes of the mourners on me, but I barely noticed. Everything else, the whispers, the tears, the flowers, the gray light filtering through the chapel, everything faded into the background. "There's money, Eleanor," he said softly. "Money that I mismanaged. Not for myself, but for someone else. Someone I thought I could help without you knowing. I didn't want to burden you with it. I know it sounds like betrayal, but I swear, it was never about hiding from you. It was about protecting you." I felt my stomach drop. My mind raced through possibilities. Money? Someone else? My heart constricted in a way that made it hard to breathe. "Who? Who are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You'll understand soon," he replied, his tone almost pleading. "But there's more. There are people, Eleanor. People I trusted who aren't what they seemed. You'll need to be careful. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear today, but it's all I could leave you with. You'll have to trust yourself now. Please, trust yourself. Don't let anyone take advantage of you." I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers ached. "Michael, this doesn't make sense. Why now? Why like this?" My tears fell freely, hot and bitter, as I struggled to process his words. There was a pause, a deep, almost painful silence, as if he were trying to summon the courage to say what came next. "I left documents," he continued finally, his voice steady, measured, "hidden, in the house. Things you need to see. Things that will explain why I did what I did. why I kept certain secrets. I didn't want to burden you, Eleanor, but now you have to know. I need you to know. Please." The line went dead. For a moment, I couldn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the phone, trembling, my mind whirling with a chaotic storm of grief, confusion, and fear. His voice had been there, real, urgent, intimate, but now it was gone. The impossible had happened, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. People around me whispered, their voices distant echoes. Some reached out to touch my shoulder to console me, but I didn't feel them. I was trapped in a space that existed between grief and revelation, between the life I had known and the truths I was about to uncover. I sank to my knees beside the casket, the phone still clutched to my ear. My fingers ran over its smooth surface, as if touching it again could summon his voice back. But the silence remained, thick and suffocating. Then my eyes fell on the leather-bound journal Peter had given me the night before. I realized with a jolt that Michael's voice had been guiding me, urging me to look deeper, to uncover what had been hidden all these years. The journal, the documents, the secrets he had carefully concealed, all of it was now my responsibility. My mind raced. Could I trust him? Could I trust the instructions he had left behind? And most importantly, what would I find when I did? The funeral service resumed, but I couldn't participate. My thoughts were consumed with the possibilities, with the questions that burned like fire in my chest. Who had he helped? Who had betrayed him? And what did it all mean for me, standing here, raw and vulnerable, at the edge of a world I didn't understand anymore? I knew then that the days to come would not be about mourning alone. They would be about discovery, about uncovering truths that could change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, and the man I had loved with every fiber of my being. The mourners moved closer to the casket, paying their respects. Some whispered, some cried. I could hear their soft murmurs, but I was elsewhere, lost in the echoes of Michael's voice, replaying his words over and over. Documents, secrets, people to be cautious of. I had no idea what awaited me, but I knew it would not be easy. Finally, I rose, my body shaking, and walked toward the study, the place he had spent countless hours of his life. I needed to see. I needed to understand. I needed to find the pieces of the puzzle he had left behind. And as I stepped through the familiar doorway, a cold shiver ran down my spine. This was no longer just grief. This was the beginning of a journey into the unknown. Every step felt heavier than the last. My hands trembled as I reached for the desk, for the drawers, for the hidden compartments he had always been so meticulous about. I opened each one carefully, my heart pounding. And then I saw them, neatly stacked, labeled, hidden beneath the false bottom of the top drawer. Files, envelopes, documents, and photographs. I picked up the first envelope. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing papers filled with names, numbers, and explanations that only Michael could have left. Each one was a revelation, each one a key to understanding why he had kept so much from me, why he had spoken in riddles and half-truths all those years. Tears blurred my vision as I realized that the man I had loved had lived a double life, not maliciously, not cruelly, but out of a desire to protect me. And yet, in protecting me, he had left me with questions, challenges, and dangers I had never anticipated. I sank to the floor, the documents scattered around me, my body trembling, my mind racing. Michael's final message had changed everything. My grief, already overwhelming, now mingled with fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of purpose. I had to understand, to uncover, to follow the trail he had left. And I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat on the floor of the study, the scattered documents and envelopes surrounding me like fragments of a life I thought I knew. My hands were shaking, my mind racing, and yet I felt a strange, almost desperate clarity. Michael's voice still echoed in my mind, urging me to uncover the truth. The journal, the papers, the files, they weren't just records of his life. They were a map, a guide, and perhaps a warning. I picked up the first envelope. The label, written in Michael's neat handwriting, read simply, "For Eleanor, you must know." My chest tightened. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside were letters, detailed accounts of financial transactions, and photographs of people I had never met, but whose names were familiar from his stories. The handwriting in the margins carried his voice, his careful explanations of why certain actions had been necessary. I read the first letter, my eyes scanning the words so quickly I almost missed the depth of what he had written. It wasn't just about money or business. It was about people, obligations, favors, and debts I had never known existed. Michael had been involved in things I had no idea about. Helping friends through crises, covering for family members, even protecting someone from legal trouble. He had kept all of this from me. Not because he didn't trust me, but because he wanted me shielded from the burden. A photograph fell out of one of the envelopes. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was Michael, smiling, standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. Her arm was draped over his shoulder, casual, familiar. My stomach twisted. My mind screamed questions I didn't want the answers to. Who was she? Why hadn't I known about her? Then, tucked beneath the photograph, was a note in Michael's handwriting. "Eleanor, please don't be angry. She is someone I promised to protect. She needed my help, and I couldn't involve you without putting you at risk. You are my life, and everything I did to shield you. I love you more than words can say." I sank back against the wall, clutching the photograph, my heart aching with a mix of confusion, grief, and a strange understanding. He had kept secrets, yes, but he had done it to protect me. The revelation was both devastating and oddly comforting. My mind struggled to reconcile the image of my husband, lying in the casket with the man who had lived this hidden life, full of responsibility and unseen burdens. I moved on to the next envelope. Inside were documents about financial accounts I had never known existed, safe deposit boxes, investments, and transfers that didn't match anything in our shared finances. Michael had clearly been meticulous, leaving instructions for me to follow, warnings about certain people to trust and others to be wary of. It was like discovering an entirely new version of him, a man I had loved, yet only partially known. And then I found it. A letter addressed not just to me, but to someone else. My hands froze as I read the name. David, Michael's old friend from college. The letter detailed a situation involving land, property, and legal entanglements I could barely understand. My heart raced. David had been a distant presence in our lives, friendly, helpful, always polite. But this was something more, something hidden. I realized that Michael had been leaving breadcrumbs, preparing for a time when he wouldn't be there to guide me. Every envelope, every note, every document was part of a larger puzzle. And now, it was my turn to piece it together. I spent hours poring over the papers, my mind oscillating between grief, fear, and determination. The documents painted a picture of a man who had lived 2 lives, one with me, filled with love and ordinary routines, and another hidden, filled with responsibilities, promises, and dangers I had never imagined. Then I found a set of instructions, typed neatly on a single sheet of paper. Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Follow these steps carefully. There are people who will come to you, claiming concern, claiming help. Trust no one blindly. The papers in the safe contain everything you need to understand my actions. Start there. The truth is waiting, but it will not be easy. Be strong. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The world I had known, our life together, was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of secrets and responsibilities. I felt a strange sense of purpose, a drive to uncover the full truth of his life, even as grief weighed heavily on my chest. As I read further, a pattern began to emerge. Michael had been protecting not just me, but others, friends, family, even strangers, from consequences I had never imagined. He had leveraged his own resources, sometimes bending rules, sometimes taking risks, all to shield those he cared about. And yet, he had left me in the dark, unable to share these burdens, unable to let me help. My mind flashed to the phone call at the funeral, the urgency in his voice, the plea for me to trust myself. I realized now that it wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. He was asking me to step into his shoes, to navigate the complexities he had left behind, and to honor the life he had built both visible and hidden. I felt tears streaming down my face, my body shaking with a mix of sorrow and determination. This was no longer just about mourning, it was about action, about understanding, about uncovering the truths that had been carefully hidden, and making sense of a world that Michael had left in my hands. And then, amidst the papers, I found something that made my breath catch. A set of blueprints, detailed and precise, marked with annotations in Michael's handwriting. They outlined a property he had purchased years ago, a seemingly ordinary piece of land, but the notes hinted at something hidden beneath, something valuable, something that explained some of the secretive actions he had taken. My heart pounded. Could this be the key? Had Michael's careful planning led me to a discovery that would change everything? I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration, the kind that comes when you are about to uncover a long-buried secret. I spent the rest of the evening cross-referencing the documents, the blueprints, and the letters. Piece by piece, a story began to emerge. Michael had been safeguarding something valuable, perhaps financially, certainly personally. He had entrusted me, in his final message, to continue the work he had started, to uncover the hidden truths, and to protect the legacy he had left behind. By the time night fell, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, yet oddly invigorated. I had faced the first layer of revelation, and I knew there was more to come. Michael had left a trail, a conversation that stretched beyond the final phone call, into the documents, the blueprints, and the carefully hidden instructions. I realized then that grief would no longer be my only companion. Curiosity, determination, and a sense of duty had joined me in this journey. Michael had trusted me with his secrets, and I could not fail him. Not now. Not ever. As I placed the papers back into their envelopes, organizing them carefully, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me. The conversation, both the phone call and the discoveries it had set in motion, had changed everything. It had shifted my grief into purpose, my despair into determination. I would uncover every secret, understand every action, and honor the man I had loved, fully and completely. And as I looked at his casket one last time before leaving the study, I whispered a promise to him, a vow I wasn't sure he could hear, but that felt essential nonetheless. I will find the truth, Michael. I will follow your path, and I will honor everything you left behind. I promise. The journey had only begun. The days following the funeral were a blur of paperwork, sleepless nights, and quiet determination. Michael's instructions had become my compass. Each envelope, each blueprint, each note he had left me was a step deeper into a world I had never known, a world where he had balanced secrecy, trust, and responsibility in ways I had never imagined. I started with the blueprints. Spread across the kitchen table, they revealed a map of our property and the surrounding land. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Our modest home, the small garden, the boundary lines marked in careful detail. But the annotations in Michael's handwriting hinted at something more. Hidden compartments, underground channels, and an old marker that read simply the I traced the lines with my finger, heart pounding. My mind raced through possibilities. A buried treasure? A secret room? My thoughts flickered to the stories he had told me over the years about his friend David, someone who had once confided in him about discovering something valuable hidden on their family land decades ago. Could it be related? Determined to find out, I gathered tools, flashlights, gloves, and began the search. Each step felt surreal, like I was moving through the house not as myself, but as a character in one of those mysteries Michael had always enjoyed reading. I remembered his voice from the phone call, steady, guiding, and imagined him beside me, urging me on. I started at the boundary line he had marked on the blueprints. The garden had always seemed ordinary, a place where he tended roses and vegetables, but I now saw it with new eyes. I dug carefully, following the markings, my hands trembling with anticipation and fear. Hours passed, sweat ran down my face, my muscles ached, but I couldn't stop. The thought of giving up seemed impossible. And then, thump! My shovel hit something solid. My heart leapt. I knelt, brushing away the soil, uncovering a small, weathered metal box. The lock was rusted, but intact. I fumbled with it, hands shaking, and finally pried it open. Inside were papers, blueprints, letters, legal documents, but also something else. A small, ornate key and a folded photograph of Michael, smiling, standing next to an older man I didn't recognize. On the back of the photo was written, "For Eleanor. You'll understand soon." I unfolded the first letter. It detailed the history of the property, dating back generations. Apparently, beneath our land flowed an old mineral spring, long forgotten by most. The spring had been renowned in the past for its therapeutic qualities, and ownership of it was tied to certain mineral rights that could be worth millions if developed. The documents included legal proof that our property encompassed the spring, along with instructions on how to claim it fully. I sank to my knees, disbelief washing over me. Michael had known all along. He had discovered the hidden value and kept it secret, not for greed, but perhaps to protect me from the complications, legal battles, and danger that might follow. The man I had thought I fully knew had been safeguarding a fortune, not for himself, but to secure my future. As I read through the letters, I realized there were layers to his planning. He had left instructions for contacting a trusted lawyer, details about historical land claims, and evidence that would prevent opportunists from exploiting the discovery. Every word, every page, was meticulously prepared, anticipating obstacles I hadn't yet imagined. My mind raced. The implications were staggering. Not only was this property valuable, but Michael had also protected me from knowing about it until the right moment, until I was ready to take responsibility, to act. I felt a mix of sorrow, admiration, and overwhelming gratitude. I paused, letting the weight of the discovery settle. Tears blurred my vision as I thought of him. His foresight, his care, the lengths he had gone to ensure I would be secure, even in death. My grief, though still raw, was now intertwined with awe. He had given me more than love, more than companionship. He had given me a path forward, a challenge, a legacy. The next step, I realized, was to secure the legal documents and ensure the claim was recognized. I contacted the lawyer Michael had mentioned, a quiet man with a precise demeanor who treated the matter with the seriousness it deserved. He reviewed the documents, cross-referenced historical claims, and confirmed that the mineral rights were indeed valuable. He assured me that, with proper steps, we could claim the spring legally and develop it responsibly. As I processed the news, my thoughts drifted to the people Michael had warned me about, the ones who might try to exploit the situation. I recalled the envelopes, the letters, the warnings about certain friends, family members, and associates. Michael's careful planning had anticipated human greed and deceit. Every instruction he left was a safeguard, a shield for me to step into the world he had carefully mapped out. I spent the following days organizing everything. I cataloged the letters, the blueprints, and the documents. I made copies, stored originals in a secure location, and followed Michael's instructions to the letter. Each action brought me closer to understanding the magnitude of his foresight, and each step made me feel closer to him, even in death. And then I found the last piece, the final letter, hidden beneath the others. In it, Michael wrote, "Eleanor, if you have reached this point, you have done exactly as I hoped. You have proven yourself strong, resourceful, and capable. The spring, the property, the documents, they are not just assets. They are a testament to the life we built and the future I hope you will create. Trust yourself, my love. You are stronger than you know. I am with you. Always." I held the letter to my chest, tears streaming freely. The grief that had consumed me felt lighter somehow, replaced by a deep sense of purpose and resolve. Michael had left me a challenge, yes, but also a gift, a chance to honor him and secure a future he had envisioned. The discovery changed everything. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a guardian of a secret, a steward of a legacy, and a woman empowered by the trust her husband had placed in her. I felt his presence in every careful note, in every hidden detail, and in the thoughtful preparation that had guided me to this point. Over the next weeks, I worked tirelessly. I met with historians, surveyed the land, verified the legal claims, and began the process of planning for the development of the spring. Each meeting, each step was a reminder of Michael's meticulous care and the trust he had placed in me. And yet, even as I navigated the practicalities of the discovery, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. The man who had orchestrated all of this, who had planned so carefully, who had loved me so deeply, was gone. I had uncovered his secrets, fulfilled his instructions, and yet I longed for him, for his presence, for the simple moments we had shared. The discovery, though monumental, was bittersweet. It was a reminder of the life we had built, the love we had shared, and the man I had lost. And yet, it was also a testament to his wisdom, his foresight, and his unwavering care for me. In the quiet moments, as I stood by the spring, tracing the water's path and imagining its potential, I felt a profound connection to him. The land, the spring, the documents, they were more than just valuable assets. They were a final act of love, a message from beyond, and a challenge to live up to the trust he had placed in me. I whispered his name into the wind, tears falling freely. "Michael, I understand now. I see everything. Thank you for everything." And in that moment, amidst the rustling leaves and the gentle flow of the water, I felt him with me. Not just in memory, but in presence. His love, his guidance, his foresight, they were all there, guiding me forward. The hidden value had been discovered, the secrets revealed, and the path ahead illuminated. But I knew this was only the beginning. The journey would continue, with challenges, decisions, and responsibilities that would test me in ways I had never imagined. Yet, I felt ready, stronger than I had ever felt, empowered by love, by loss, and by the trust Michael had placed in me. The grief remained, yes, but it had transformed into purpose, into resolve, into determination. I would honor him, protect his legacy, and step boldly into the future he had envisioned. And for the first time since his death, I felt a sense of peace. The first light of dawn broke through the windows, painting the study in soft shades of gold. I sat at the desk, the documents neatly organized, the blueprints carefully rolled, and the letters placed in order. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. Not the hollow calm of resignation, but a quiet confidence that I could navigate the path ahead. Michael's voice lingered in my mind, a gentle guide, urging me onward. The discovery of the mineral spring and the land rights had transformed my world. What had begun as grief and uncertainty had evolved into clarity and purpose. I understood now that Michael's careful planning, his secrecy, and even the final, mysterious phone call had all been intended to prepare me, not just for loss, but for responsibility, for empowerment, for life beyond his presence. I knew the next steps would be complex. Legal processes, property development, and negotiations with experts lay ahead. But felt ready. Every instruction Michael had left, every warning he had whispered through his notes, had prepared me for this moment. I was no longer just a widow, a grieving figure in black. I was a steward of a legacy, a woman entrusted with something valuable, sacred, and powerful. The first task was to finalize the legal claim. I met with the lawyer again, presenting the documents and evidence. Each step felt surreal: the verification of ownership, the historical claims, the confirmation that the spring's value was legitimate. The lawyer, professional and precise, looked at me with a mixture of respect and surprise. "You've done exceptionally well," he said. "Most people would struggle to navigate this, but you've handled everything meticulously." I smiled faintly, a small spark of pride igniting in my chest. Michael had believed in me. He had trusted that I could carry this responsibility. And now, with each careful step, I realized that I could. The next phase was to plan the development responsibly. The spring could be transformed into a sustainable wellness retreat, preserving its natural beauty while providing a safe, prosperous future. I consulted with environmental experts, architects, and historians, each meeting deepening my understanding and appreciation for what Michael had left behind. He had not just left a fortune, he had left a vision, a plan to enrich lives while protecting the land he had loved. As the weeks passed, I became more confident, more decisive. Every choice, every decision was guided by the principles Michael had instilled in his letters and notes. I felt his presence in every careful step, his wisdom in every choice I made. The grief, though still present, became a companion rather than a burden, a reminder of love, of life shared, of lessons learned. One afternoon, as I walked along the boundary of the property, tracing the contours of the land and the flow of the spring, I reflected on how far I had come. The woman who had answered the phone at the funeral, trembling and uncertain, had transformed. I had faced secrets, revelations, and challenges that could have broken me. Yet I had not only survived, I had grown. I thought of the friends and family who had gathered at the funeral, who had offered condolences, and who had whispered behind my back. I realized that their judgment, their curiosity, and even their pity mattered less now. I had a purpose, a responsibility, and a future that was mine to shape. No one else's opinions could diminish what I had discovered or the trust Michael had placed in me. I also thought of Michael himself, the man I had loved, lost, and now understood more deeply than ever. His foresight, his careful planning, his love, they were all tangible, present, guiding me even in his absence. I whispered his name softly into the wind, feeling a sense of connection that transcended grief. "Thank you, Michael," I murmured, "for everything." The spring became a focal point of both reflection and action. I designed paths, planted native flora, and ensured that the development plans preserved the natural beauty. Every decision felt like a dialogue with Michael, a partnership across time, a continuation of his vision. The land, once ordinary to me, now felt sacred, alive with potential, and brimming with meaning. In the evenings, I would sit by the study window, reviewing documents, planning, and reflecting. Sometimes I would read Michael's letters again, finding comfort and guidance in his handwriting. Other times I would simply close my eyes and remember the life we had shared. The laughter, the quiet moments, the ordinary beauty of our routines. It was a delicate balance, honoring the past while shaping the future. I began to share the project with a small team of trusted advisors, professionals Michael had indirectly recommended through his notes. We discussed strategies, environmental protections, and sustainable development. Their respect for my leadership grew with each meeting. I could feel Michael's approval in the subtle ways my team deferred to me, recognizing that the woman who had discovered the spring was the same woman who would guide its future. One day, I received an unexpected visitor. David, Michael's old friend mentioned in the letters, arrived quietly at the property. His demeanor was cautious, respectful, almost reverent. I remembered Michael's warning about him, but also his implicit trust. I invited him in, and together, we reviewed the documents he had helped Michael secure decades ago. David's presence clarified many of the questions left unanswered. He spoke of Michael's foresight, his kindness, and the quiet ways he had worked to protect those he loved. He confirmed that Michael's choices had been deliberate, thoughtful, and deeply compassionate. Through him, I understood not just the value of the spring, but the depth of Michael's character. The man who had loved me, planned for me, and left me a path forward, even in death. Weeks turned into months. The plans for the spring's development progressed. Legal matters were resolved. Environmental studies were completed. Designs for a retreat were finalized. And through it all, I felt a growing sense of empowerment, a confidence in my own abilities, and a connection to Michael that transcended absence. Yet, I also found moments of quiet joy. I would walk along the spring, feeling the cool water against my hands, imagining the people who would one day visit, heal, and find peace. I would sit on the porch of our home, the sun setting in golden hues, and remember the life we had shared. The grief, though still present, had transformed into gratitude, reverence, and purpose. Friends began to notice a change in me. Diane, who had stood by me at the funeral, remarked on my calm confidence, my sense of direction. Others expressed admiration for the way I had handled the complexities of the legacy Michael had left. Their acknowledgement, though welcome, mattered less than the knowledge that I had honored him, followed his instructions, and embraced the responsibilities he had entrusted to me. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still and the sun dipped below the horizon, I would whisper my thanks to him, feeling his presence in the rustling leaves, the flow of the spring, and the gentle weight of the land. "I will make this right, Michael," I would say softly. "I will honor you, your life, and your trust. Always." The journey had begun with grief, uncertainty, and a phone call that had shattered my world. But it had led me to understanding, empowerment, and a profound sense of purpose. I had faced secrets, challenges, and revelations that could have broken me. Instead, they had shaped me, strengthened me, and prepared me to step boldly into the future. And now, as I stood at the edge of the property, feeling the wind on my face and the water flowing beneath my fingertips, I realized that Michael's legacy was not just the spring, not just the documents, not just the plans. It was the trust he had placed in me. That trust had transformed me, lifted me, and given me the courage to live fully, even in his absence. I knew the road ahead would not be without challenges. Legal disputes, development obstacles, and unforeseen complications were inevitable, but I also knew that I had the strength, the wisdom, and the resolve to navigate them. I was no longer a passive participant in life, grieving in silence. I was an active force, shaping the future, honoring the past, and carrying forward the love and vision of the man who had trusted me above all. And so I moved forward, step by step, decision by decision, embracing the legacy, the love, and the life Michael had left for me. With every action, every choice, every moment of reflection, I honored him. And in doing so, I discovered not just the hidden value of a mineral spring, but the enduring power of love, trust, and resilience. The grief remained, yes, but it had transformed. It had become a quiet companion, a reminder of what was lost, and a catalyst for what could be gained. I had faced the impossible, uncovered secrets, and stepped into a life filled with purpose and hope. And in the heart of it all, I felt him with me. Michael, my husband, my guide, my love, his legacy alive not just in documents or land, but in the strength, determination, and courage he had inspired in me. I whispered one final promise into the evening air. "I will live, Michael. I will honor you, and I will carry your trust with me, always." And for the first time since that devastating funeral, I felt truly at peace.